You talked earlier today about the manufacturers of the pump going on board. Have they made it over there, and has there been any progress?
The pump manufacturer has sent a technical specialist. That specialist went on board and has been working with the Spitzer solvers to fine-tune the system. There are a couple of problems that they've had during the day. They have had to swap out one of the booster pumps again. They've also had to, they had a power outage for about 15 minutes. So once again, it's that complex environment that they're working in, trying to have these machines operating and just pinging on balconies over the water. So they've got everything back and running and operating as far as I know.
Having looked at it, is the manufacturer confident they can get it working faster? I haven't had a report back from the manufacturers, but I'm sure that will be the response that they'll be doing, is they'll be working with the Spitzer technicians to make sure that they're optimising the system. So, they're not going to leave any ounce that they can't push the system. But it's important to remember that they're also being careful that if they crank it up too much, they could blow the whole system and destroy the pumps, and then we're right back to square one. So they're going to do this in a very considered way to make sure that the pumps, survive the pressure that they're being put under. It's not the solvers, it's actually the oil. It's tough oil to get out of these deep tanks and down a 160 metre hose to the LNG. The 171 tonnes, does that include the 60 overnight and what we've seen previously? Is it total, or is that from today?
What I'm trying to do is make sure that there is absolute clarity on the numbers. There was previously 772 tonnes in port number 5, and now they have removed 171 tonnes from it.
In total?
And that's the way I'll report them in the future. Previous in there, and so that's the only number that you'll get.
So Bruce, how much oil is left on that starboard tank?
Starboard, there's about starboard number 5 is about 356 tonnes.
Right, can we take a question from the front?
Yeah, what exactly caused the power outage? Do you know?
No.
I also had a question for Alex.
Sure.
Just with the beach is opening, so when will they be opened from?
I signed off for an open from 3 o'clock this
So
afternoon.
they're open now?
Up to Day Street, yes.
And so just exactly with the black sand, so was there not actually that oil down in those 200 millimetres? Because that's what was talked about yesterday, that there was that 200 millimetres of oil in the top layer.
I think from my recollection that was probably a bit further south towards the moment, and that is what we are looking at.
Are people allowed to hop in the water, go fishing, collect shellfish?
We've opened the beach. What people wish to do is for them to consider. Okay.
So they can go into the water?
If they wish.
Other questions? For Bruce, a few public water residents are a bit concerned. You've talked about plans about when the stern falls off to pull it to about 50 metres deep water, to shallow water. They're a bit concerned that that's right on their doorstep and that they're going to be left with a boat out there, maybe oil coming onshore for years.
There are a number of options should the vessel park. First of all, that it may stay where it is. Secondly, that it may just sink where it is. And then the third option is that it may be buoyant enough to be able to tow as it's sinking to a shallow area. The key about that is that the difference is trying to get rid of containers and other pollutants on board the vessel in 90 metres of water versus 50 metres of water. So the residents of Papamoa would end up with the same problem regardless of where that vessel is, and there are 5 sites that have been identified where the vessel could be taken if that option was the one that it eventuated. And it depends on weather conditions, it depends on how the vessel is able to float, if it floats. So there's a range of variables before we even get to the place of it being towed to Papamoa.
And most of those 5 spots do?
No, spread around, because if you centre on the reef, we need to be aware of all the weather directions which may influence it. You're not going to be able to tow this thing which will be mostly submerged upwind or up current, so it's going to be much influenced by the weather conditions.
Bruce, how long has it been since any fresh oil has been spotted around the ship, and how much sheen is there visible around the ship at the moment? there's obviously sheen is oil, so it's just a measure of how light it is. There were some larger spots yesterday, but they weren't major spots. They were small amounts. It's hard to give a figure on it, but the large amounts of oil have not been released. So there aren't large amounts since the large storm we had quite a few days ago.
Any final questions?
Sorry. I know you don't like going ahead, but assuming you do pump all night, could you get 300 tonnes off by tomorrow?
Let's wait till tomorrow's press conference, and then we'll give an updated figure.
Come out before.
We'll give an updated figure on how much oil is being pumped off. They will keep pumping for as long as they can, and it's safe to do so. Getting up at 25 to 30 knots of breeze, that is going to have an impact on the Awanui's ability to keep stationed safely. So that's one of those questions that we need to just keep monitoring whether they'll make a decision on whether they can continue pumping.
Bruce, just to be clear, so how much all the oil that was originally there is still on board?
Okay, so the fuel budget, and you guys will have to do the maths on it, there was 772 in port number 5. There was about 220 in the settling tanks inside the engine room, and then there's about 356 in starboard number 5. Out of that, and remembering that port number 5 we've taken 171 tonnes out.